All right. So I guess I'm back. I thought I was streaming. I wasn't streaming. Shit fucking happens. Life happens. I was standing up. I was sitting down. I was looking for a lighter. My brother fucking saved my ass. Um, so my big plan to stream with you guys was I was going to show you all the evidence I've gone through over the last year. Problem is I bought a laptop instead of a desktop because they're sold out of processors nationwide. And basically laptops are weird with display capture. So I'm going to try to set it up while I'm talking to you about it. Because I actually have a lot of feelings about... what has happened over the last couple of days that I want to kind of talk to you about. And maybe you guys want to hit me up in chat. And we can all just kind of share our fucking misery about it. So... one of the things I'm kind of disappointed with and kind of annoyed with is that Trump is known for playing 4D chess, right? Like, he's always like 2 steps ahead of the enemy. And I'm just kind of like, well, maybe he's not. Like, somebody should have been arrested by now. Like, people were definitely voted twice in Nevada, right? We know 10,315 dead people voted in Georgia. We know they have more than 200,000 voters above the available voters in Pennsylvania. Things like that, right? Like, we know those things are true. Research has allowed that to be bared out. But nobody's under arrest. Love Trump. However, if it wasn't just about him, those people would be under arrest. They should be under arrest. Forget about whether or not it would change the outcome of the election. Why aren't they under arrest? So it bothers me because maybe I feel like Trump was playing a game. Maybe I feel like we all had our hopes up. Like, why call everybody to D.C.? People spent money. Poor people, middle-class people spent money out of their own pockets to go to D.C. to be there to support him. But there was no plan. None, right? Like, so where was that? And I don't want to lay all the blame at Trump's feet. It's really not just a him problem. It's also a larger problem, is that we have like a media where, like, yes, they're fake news, they're this and that and the other thing, but so much of this research is so easy to do. So just go and look, Google, like, what Joe Biden's top donors are. And you'll find really quickly that he got $147 million from investment securities and shit like that, right? From finance people, right? So CNN says, Wall Street wants Biden. It's not Wall Street, dude. That's China. Like, don't get it twisted. Every month, every quarter, something like that, we pay billions and billions and billions of dollars to China so that they can, just in interest. We do that in interest payments on the money we've borrowed from them. We give them that money, and what do? They reinvest back into our private investment funds. They invest into BlackRock. They invest into Vanguard. Any way they can, they put that money back into the American economy. And then what that does is it gives them control. So you don't have to trust me. You can go and Google search, like, what percentage of, say, Apple BlackRock owns, right? And I'll tell you, like, once you figure out how many shares they have and how many shares China owns, it's about 6%. So they own about 6% of Apple, Google, Twitter, Tesla. They own about 6% of every social media organization for sure. And then they own, well, let's look at AT&T, right? Like, AT&T is owned by Warner Media. I mean, sorry. Let's look at CNN. CNN is owned by Warner Media. Warner Media is owned by AT&T. AT&T's largest shareholder is BlackRock, and BlackRock's largest shareholder is Vanguard, which is about a fucking million different funds, which are all largely owned by China. And you, by the way. So China figured out how to tie their investments to your retirement accounts. So if the economy goes up, China wins. If it goes down, they win. Because you're poorer, they win. Or if it goes up, they win. But also, when they own 6% of any company, when you look at like a guy like Zuckerberg, who's got billions and billions of dollars, he's not keeping that money in a savings account somewhere. It's not like that. They keep it in stocks, right? They keep it in their companies. They invest it in a broad swath of stuff that China's also invested in. And if they piss off China, guess what? China's not going to let Facebook operate inside of China. China's not going to let Google operate inside of China. One of the big things that AG Barr used to talk about a lot was, do you really think for a second that they would let Apple phones, with the security they have on them, be sold in China without a back door? The answer to that is no, they wouldn't. Like, it doesn't matter that you encrypt your phone. China would never let them sell an encrypted phone inside of their country without a back door in to spy on what people are saying. Like, I fully believe, after way too much research, that China owns a bit of everything. And so that's rough. And then forget about whether or not you believe in election fraud, and I can get into that if anybody wants me to. But the biggest problem is that we now have a situation where Democrats are in charge of the executive branch, the legislative branch, completely. Now, that's not new. They've been in charge of it 80 of the last 100 years. So that's fine, right? Like, it's not like, oh, the world's going to end. Like, we'll all be fine. But the thing that scares me is if you remember earlier in the year when they were rioting and looting and they were saying defund the police and they were basically saying all police were evil. Well, if they all were evil and you were a police officer, wouldn't you quit? And the answer is no. The answer is no, because they're government employees. And yes, they're being called evil, and their own bosses are saying they're pieces of shit and garbage. But they still have families to feed. They still have futures to live for, right? And that's the long, slow slope to oblivion, right? Is that if it just gets a little bit bad all the time. Sorry, I'm going to move my camera because I just realized it's bad. If it gets a little bit worse all the time, you just kind of don't notice. And that's what's really happening, is you kind of just don't notice. Just, it's getting a little worse all the time, every year that goes by. But if you look at, and I'm not saying Trump's the Messiah, but if you look at 40 years before, Trump came along, middle class wages didn't go up. They actually stagnated. They stayed flat. And when you looked at the health of urban neighborhoods, or our education system, or whatever metric you choose, our country was getting worse, slowly and steadily. We all celebrated the fall of the Berlin Wall. We all were happy to see that America came out on top. But the end result of that was the wall fell in 89, and by 1992, Bill Clinton was elected. We thought the future was going to be so bright. And we were looking for a savior. And I think ever since 1992, we've been looking for a savior. We looked at Bill Clinton, George Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, They were all going to save us. And I think maybe Trump came the closest to actually following through on his word. I mean, there's literally only one campaign promise he didn't fulfill, and that was drain the swamp. That one's hurtful because that's the one that mattered. We could have dealt with not having a wall for a couple more years. And sadly, we probably could have dealt with another useless war. But having these swamp rats, they're thieves. They steal liberty and trade it for money for themselves. You know, it's like having a Judas next to you. So watching the Capitol get quote-unquote stormed was really difficult for me because I wanted America to hear the evidence. But to be honest, I doubt many people were watching until people did storm the Capitol. And I was completely unsurprised that for the last year we've been told that every action by a leftist is just peaceful protest and every action by a right-winger is evil. Like, I get that. It's insurrection. I've seen it be called. I've seen it be called a riot. I've never seen people stay inside the velvet ropes at a riot, but whatever. But I think, you know, it was hurtful because we all kind of hoped that they would share the evidence and that our neighbors would hear it. And I guess that's what's going to take me to my next subject. To the liberals out there, to the Democrats out there, let's have a chat about this. When the election was over, we were told 80 million people voted for Joe Biden. You think that they voted for Joe Biden. It's cool for you. But you have to understand what it was like for everybody who likes to work for a living or wants to be able to feed their family or wants a future for America. Or cares about the black community. To me, when you voted for Joe Biden, you voted against your neighbors, you voted against your family members, you voted against minorities, you voted against everybody. You voted against their right to work and make a decent living. You voted against their ability to be free from the corruption of fucking shitty police departments. You voted... And let me clear that up. See, what happened is Joe Biden only ran on a few things. He ran on getting rid of guns. He ran on increasing lockdowns. And he ran on ending fracking. And he ran on the Paris Climate Accords. To be honest, like the Paris Climate Accords, I'll do a whole thing about that. Maybe in a few minutes. Who fucking knows? Because I can stream all night, right? But he ran on more lockdowns. And way too many of my friends work in the restaurant business. My brother, who lent me his lighter so I could do this and sit here and bullshit with you guys, he's worked in the restaurant business his entire life. And just before COVID hit, he got the job of his dreams. He had a 401k, he had health care, he had everything going for him. Yeah, he lived with me, but he was paying me rent and everything was going good, and we were actually happy, you know, my daughter and me and him, and it was good. And then COVID came and they said he's not allowed to work anymore. And they did the unemployment extension, the whole thing, and that was kind of cool. Like, he got to spend more time with my daughter and get to know his niece. And I hated it because, like, I know how important work is for the sanity of a man. But I liked it because After 20 years on the road, it was nice to see a member of my family get to know me and get to know my daughter. And okay, but it's over. Like, COVID's over. Like, yeah, people will still die. But you can't sell the car anymore. For one, you already sold the car. For two, you stopped counting influenza cases. You stopped reporting them anyway. Maybe you're counting them. Fucking who knows. But he works in the service industry. And he can't work anymore. In a few months, I retire from my job, and I have to move. I have to figure out what my next step is, and I've been taking care of him because the economy was bad, and under Trump, it got kind of good for him. And then COVID hit, and life fucking shit. And it's nothing new for us. We know life happened. But just when COVID started to clear up, the election finished. And as soon as the election was over, they said, get the fuck in your house. Get in your fucking house, you fucking peasants. Nobody's coming outside. Nobody's coming outside until Joe Biden's sitting on the throne. That's what they said. And you can go back. You can look at the COVID numbers. They didn't increase dramatically nationwide. It was relatively flat, actually, nationwide. Here and there, it was going up. As the temperature changes, you can fully expect that. That's when you have a country our size, you can fully expect that the virus will hit at a different pace in different areas as the climate changes. Similarly to allergies or hay fever or whatever, right? Is trees pollinate and do shit at different elevations, different temperatures. Same thing with viruses. They're just organisms. But it stayed roughly flat. But he's not going back to work. And Joe Biden ran on lockdowns. Now, I'm pretty sure that now that the election's over, they'll go back to work, and that'll be cool. And everybody will pretend like he saved our lives from something. That literally nobody in my house has met anybody who's had COVID. And that's a shame, right? It's not a shame that nobody had COVID. It's just a shame that we have zero fucking experience dealing with it. It looks like I might have somebody in chat. If you want to ask me a question, it's just me talking to myself right now, but just sharing my thoughts. But he can't go to work. So promise one of Joe Biden is fucking complete, right? You don't get to fucking work. Lockdowns, right? Promise two is guns. Well, guess what? They're sold out nationwide. And I feel like I need to buy one right now. Never in my life have I felt the need to buy a gun. But literally, it's become a regular topic of conversation in my house. I've literally thought about becoming a gunsmith. How crazy is that? Because I can't trust anybody anymore. And then he ran on ending fracking. And that's the one that kind of fucking blows my mind, right? Because you end fracking. Well, Pennsylvania's been doing pretty good. And you want me to believe that Pennsylvania voted against their own neighbors in numbers that are fucking unheard of. Let me give you an example. I didn't crunch the numbers for every county in Pennsylvania. I picked one county. I picked Allegheny County. And I looked, and in January of last year, they had 957,000 voters registered. Which I thought was weird, because when I looked at their population according to the census, and then I minused out everybody under the age 18, and then I minused out 55% of foreign-born citizens, I found that they only had 952,000 people. And the reason why that's important is that 952,000 people is less than 957,000 people. So how do you have 957,000 registered voters when you only have 952,000 eligible voters? Now, you might ask where I came up with the number on the illegal immigrants. Fair question. I looked at Pew Research. They did research on it, and their results was that roughly 45% of foreign-born immigrants were naturalized, so they were allowed to vote. So that leaves 55% you can delete out of the population. Similarly, I looked at LA County. It was 91% of the population was registered to vote. That's a place where they use their needles, and then they put them on the floor, and then they shit on their needles. Now, I've been to decent towns where I can tell you 4 out of 5 bartenders probably don't vote. Just because their lives are too hectic. There's a good portion of America who's just trying to get through, man. And they don't register to vote. And when you look at some of these places, they're registered 80, 90, 100, 110%. When you look at Allegheny County in Pennsylvania, for example, 98 out of 100 people are registered to vote. That's Pittsburgh, man. That's country. People have problems there. They have real fucking problems, and they're working their butts off to solve them. They just got to keep the electric on, you know? And you're telling me that 98 out of 100 people there are registered to vote. Beyond that, 480,000 jobs in Pittsburgh, in Allegheny County, are tied to mining, construction, and the service industry. So mining, transportation, and the service industry. So we're talking truckers, we're talking people looking for fuel, coal, gas, shit like that, and people who serve you at your restaurant, your local bar. 480,000 jobs are tied to that. There's only 952,000 people there. And so the lesson in that is that either the election was rigged, or for them, for the people who live there, either the election was rigged, or all of their neighbors voted against their ability to earn a living. Just sorry, Susan. I don't want you to be able to feed your kids. So fuck you, because I like Joe Biden. I don't like Trump. Trump's a bad guy. And so I don't want you to be able to work. Trump's a meanie. He's the orange man bad. So now you're not allowed to make a living. Tom. That's one option. One option is that all your neighbors are against you. Every neighbor you have hates you, doesn't care about your problems, and is fucking downright evil. Or somebody rigged it. So this past weekend I decided to drive through Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. Because it went for Biden in a way that county has not gone for a presidential candidate since the 70s. Now you'll say, well, there's more people now. No, there isn't. Allegheny County was 30% larger when LBJ was fucking getting votes there. There's 30% less people, and Joe Biden got more votes there than any candidate since then. Not only that, Shapiro, the Attorney General, got 40,000 more votes than Joe Biden. He got more votes than the presidential candidate, which is fucking unheard of. Unheard of. People go, why doesn't the Attorney General step in? Why doesn't the governor step in? they get to win off of it too. It's pay to play, man. You want a seat at the table? Go along with it. You don't want a seat at the table? Fight it. That's what I looked into in the details of Allegheny County. And then when I drove through it, I saw over 300 Trump signs on lawns. 300 Trump signs. And only one Biden sign. Now maybe they took their signs down because they already won, quote unquote. But what are the odds, right? And you know what? Everywhere between Virginia and Niagara Falls, I saw the same thing. I counted over 1,000 Trump signs between here and there. And in total, I found 4 Biden signs. The day after the election, on my street, on my main road here through my town, there was 2 houses that had Biden signs. The day after the election, they took them down. So maybe they're just hardcore Democrats. Maybe they're whatever. They didn't love Joe Biden. They didn't love Kamala Harris. What are the odds that everybody in the country, 80 million people, came out and voted for a guy that they were ashamed to vote for? One thing we all know that happens is the day after this team wins the Super Bowl, their MVP sells the fuck out of jerseys. It happens. We call them fair weather fans. Somebody should have been lining up to be like, yeah, I voted for Biden. Look at me. Didn't happen, right? So, we've got this weird situation where we've got this presidential candidate guy who's supposed to be the president next, and maybe I moved my mic too close, I'm not sure. But he's supposed to be the president, and nobody likes him. So what happened? Well, a couple things. You can look at all the evidence, but I feel like if you were going to look at the evidence of election meddling, you would have done it already. You would have done it already. There was over 25 hours of testimony before state legislatures, completely corroborated by signed affidavits under penalty of perjury to the same effect. There was data scientists. There were multiple news articles written by respected journalists going, something's amiss here. There's plenty of information and data out there. People go, why didn't the DOJ act? Well, that's actually simple. The DOJ can only enforce federal law. Since elections are managed by the state, they can't enforce state law. That's not their business. That's not their job. So, the DOJ can only operate off of existing federal election law. And as I said, 80 out of 100 of the last years, Democrats have ran it. And they specifically designed the system to which the federal government really doesn't have any oversight over elections. Kind of a bitch. Kind of a thing. But that's what it is. I'm going to change my title because maybe I don't have any I have one viewer, and whoever's listening, I really, really appreciate it. Maybe you're just leaving it running with the volume down. I don't know. But I appreciate you. Let's see. What would be a good search engine optimization title for this little mini podcast I'm doing here? Election storming, right? We should use that word. They like the storming. Insurrection. BS. Let's call it that. Let's try that and see if that helps. So, what else? Well, let's see. It's been a kind of a weird year, and I kind of like took some notes. So let me go through some of it. Let's talk about Antifa. Let's see. Andy No, if you don't follow him on YouTube or Facebook or whatever, he's amazing. He's an actual journalist, which we don't have many of left. He regularly posts pictures of people who've been arrested for illegal acts as part of Antifa. And for whatever reason, they all seem to be registered sex offenders, child molesters, etc. You even have, like, he lovely picture of two white people in gas masks with their child and fucking Kevlar helmets on. Like, it's actually, it would be funny if it wasn't fucking gross. Let's see. I want to pull my camera off the tripod so you guys can see what I'm looking at. Maybe you can see. I don't know. We'll find out. I'm new to this. We'll all be friends eventually. Alright. Let's do this. Alright. Everybody see me? Let me pull this up and see how I look. Hey, that's my face. See this? This is where I had nose cancer. I swear to God, I fucking had a melanoma. Maybe it wasn't a, they said it was a basal cell carcinoma, but it was a skin cancer, right? And I had to have it cut off. And I wasn't going to record a video until it healed, but the world lost its fucking mind. And this actually makes it look really small. But you know what's nuts? You get these crazy fucking pimples. Crazy, because you have these bandages on your nose and stuff. All right, so let's pull up. Let's see what we can do here. Let me see if I can split screen this bitch. Let's do this. There you go. Cool. And then let's do this. So over here we have an influential militant Antifa activist who calls for violence has been identified as Seattle area children's camp counselor. A children's camp counselor. Andrew Baker. A trans non-binary furry who last week published a hit list on social media. And this is what Andrew Baker looks like. You tracking me? I love Andy No. He's such a good fucking reporter because everybody's pretending. Oh, this is another thing I looked. One is in Antifa. This is my year in review we're doing right now. One is in Antifa in Portland. The other is a Nazi rally. Can you tell the difference? Well, little known fact, the Nazis were socialists. They all pretend like they were all conservative. Somehow, like magically, they were all conservative. That's some BS. Okay? The National Socialist Party. That's what Nazi stood for. Okay? Oh yeah. Remember when they just pretended like the riots were peaceful protests until it affected their polls? Don Lemon made the whole speech about how we've got to stop doing this because fucking it's affecting our poll numbers. Oh, yeah. Let's see. Remember Kenosha? That happened this year. That was a fucking bitch. That poor kid. Like, that kid... Let's just talk about it. Like, I watched the video. He waited until the absolute last second before he shot. What a fucking saint. Because I wouldn't have been so good, right? Let's see. Do you guys remember Connor Hinnett? A lot of people wouldn't. But he was this adorable little boy. And he was shot. Sorry, he's dead. Yeah, a grown man put a gun to his head and killed him because he was white. Just shot him. He was just playing in his neighborhood. He's dead now. He's dead. Let's see. Oh, yeah, while we weren't paying attention because everything else was fucking insane this year. Stop Home Manufacture of Ghost Guns Act of 2020 passed the House. So, there's a whole lot of things I'm not an expert on, guys, but this is one that I'm pretty fucking good at. I'm a machinist and a welder by trade. My country taught me how to do it. And literally, I read this bill and I was like, oh, so you just made manufacturing anything in America illegal without a permit. You're not allowed to make a horseshoe. You're not allowed to make a fucking door jamb, a door stop. Your 3D printer is garbage. Everything is illegal because this act basically says that any piece of equipment that could make a gun is illegal. Unless you seek a permit from the federal government. If you think that that bill will not pass now, that Congress is all blue and the president is blue too, you're outside of your fucking mind. Which means manufacturing's dead in America, not because it has to be, because they used people's feelings about weapons to make, because the same pieces of equipment are used to manufacture everything that are used to manufacture guns. And these assholes just said, well, fuck it. We're just going to make the equipment illegal to make the guns. And maybe they thought about it, maybe they didn't. But they made making anything illegal because the equipment's illegal. You're going to have to seek a permit to learn how to make things. Like the whole prepper movement where people like learn how to do things on their own so that they don't have to rely on the economy, that's over. It's going to be illegal. They passed that last year in the House. All it has to do is cross the Senate floor now, and Schumer's in charge now. So I guess you're fucking welcome. Let's see. What else we got here? Oh, yeah. So I took a cool video this year. This was one I saw. And it was Jerry Nadler. He just passed the fuck out in the middle of interviewing A.G. Barr. You can find it on my YouTube page, but he was definitely snoring. Later in the year, he shit his pants on TV, which is awesome. That guy's in charge of stuff. What else we got here? Oh, here is Ted Wheeler, the mayor of Portland. He is calling for immediate meeting with Department of Homeland Security leadership on the ground of Portland with Acting Secretary of the DHS of Wolf to discuss the ceasefire and removal of heightened federal forces from Portland. Do you guys remember when Ted Wheeler said he could negotiate on behalf of Antifa? That he had somehow had the authority to make Antifa stop rioting. Should have been arrested right then and there. He was the mayor of the town. He wasn't supposed to be able to... He was deciding for them when they would riot or not. Let's see. Oh yeah, they ambushed a bunch of cops this year. You guys remember that? They just fucking ambushed the shit out of police officers. And then decided like, oh yeah, well, they're cops, so fuck them. They should die. All cops are bad. You remember ACAB? Oh yeah, you remember when the Smithsonian posted about how everything was determined by white people? Everything ever was invented by white people. Good decision making is apparently racist. Apparently math is white people stuff, and so we should stop. Yeah, so that was a fun thing. Oh, you remember when they tried to fucking ban Goya beans? Yeah, they did that. And then this cool kid right here, him and his dad or mom or whatever got together, bought a bunch of Goya beans, and went and donated them to a local shelter. And you know what they were? They were thankful. What else? Oh, I got a light on this thing. That makes me washed out, though. Let's do that. Okay. Oh, do you remember when Vanessa Gillen died? She was in the army, and she just fucking died. Got murdered. Beautiful young lady. Just got murdered. Nobody cared. Didn't matter. George Floyd mattered. The meth head mattered. Let's see. Oh, this was a cute one. So this one, sorry, I hope it focuses. Leftist hit by cars died. Black men charged for it. BLM leaders quitting due to far left and Antifa. Forget about the last bit. So there was an Eritrean man who was an immigrant to our country, legal, lawful immigrant. And he went driving down the highway, as you should be allowed to fucking do. And some fucking white lady was protesting on behalf of Black Lives Matter. And this black man accidentally hit her because she was in the middle of the fucking highway. Hit her. And this Eritrean man, who is an immigrant to our country, lawful, was arrested. Black Lives Matter got a black man arrested. This adding up for you? This is the stupidest year ever. What else we got? Let's see. Oh, do you remember when Minnesota Governor Walz asked for $500 million in damages because his own people burned down their fucking city? That's ridiculous. Let's see. Or when these people had their property invaded, and then were arrested because they pulled their lawfully owned weapons out. You know what's funny about this year is we had millionaires, billionaires, everybody lined up to donate to Black Lives Matter. BTS, which is apparently some fucking Korean pop band, John Cena, Lady Gaga, The Weeknd, Braden Holtby, who I'd never fucking heard of, Anna Kendrick, Chris Evans, Harry Styles, Chrissy Teigen, Steve Carell, Drake, Michael Jordan, Leonardo DiCaprio, Jennifer Aniston, Kristen Bell, Ashton Kutcher. They all donated to Black Lives Matter. All that money went to Act Blue, which then went wherever the fuck they wanted it to go. And all I could think at the time was there's 8.9 million black people in poverty. And you have BTS, which is worth 60 million. John Cena worth 55 million. Gaga's 27 million. The Weeknd's worth 90 million. Anna Kendrick's worth 20. Chris Evans is worth 70. Harry Styles is 75. I don't even know who that guy is, and he's worth $75 million. Chrissy Teigen's another 75. Steve Carell, 80. These people were worth a lot of money. Drake's worth 180 million somehow. Michael Jordan's worth 2.1 billion. Leonardo DiCaprio's worth 260 million. Aniston's 300 million. You know, if they just gave $100,000 to a black person, to one of those 8.9 million poor black people in America, they could have solved poverty. If each one of them just gave $100,000 to a poor black person, or 50, you know how much 50,000 would do to the average person's life in America? A lot. A fucking lot. And these assholes. No. Anyway. Alright guys, I guess I'm going to call it quits here because, well, it's fucking late. But I was just kind of trying to do a year in review. I could do it all day. I wanted to do it better. I promise you I did. But I'm still learning. I hope you have a good night. God bless, and I hope our country survives this.